What in the fuck is going on with the gaming industry right now? I don't know if anybody has seen, but apparently we have had over 8,000 jobs that were laid off within the gaming industry in 2024 alone, and that joins the 10,000 layoffs that we had in 2023. 2023? Like, 2023 was just insane for games. How in the fuck can that many people's jobs be in trouble? I can't be asked going through them all now and explaining exactly where everybody has been laid off, but I will link a video that I watched yesterday. It should be up here now, where you can see it's kind of an overview of all of the layoffs starting from 2023 until now, where they came from. But some of the ones that are most striking for me are Sony, who have laid off 900 people, and that affected multiple studios, including some really, really big ones like Naughty Dog and Insomniac games. And I'm going to touch on them in just a little bit because I have shit to say about that. Another one is EA, who have apparently reduced their workforce by 5%. And I don't think that that is their first layoff as well. I could be wrong. This is from GameSpot.com, an article that came out a couple of days ago. Sony and EA constitute only recent examples of an enormous widespread convulsion of layoffs throughout the gaming industry that began in 2023. A startling number of developers and publishers have made major staff reductions, including Epic Games, the many studios owned by the Embracer Group, by Microsoft, Take-Two Interactive, Amazon, Bungie, CD Projekt Red, Ubisoft, Riot Games, and Unity. In just the first 2 months of 2024, the games industry saw at least 8,100 people laid off, according to a running tally of announcements kept by developer Riot Games. Now, what doesn't make sense to me is this medium, video games as a medium, it's the biggest it's ever been. It is continuously growing, or has been until recently, and I think that this is kind of one of the big reasons for all of these layoffs, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But regardless of the slight decrease that I'm going to get into in just a minute, this seems astounding for the amount of money that is coming into the gaming industry. So essentially, what this seems to come down to is that profit margins have decreased slightly over the last couple of years in video games, but they are still up 5%. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a financial expert. I'm just reading a press release here from something called EY Switzerland, who have done a report on the profit margins and the revenue margins of the biggest gaming companies in the industry. And at the top here it says revenue of the top 26 gaming companies grow only slightly at 5%. Profit margins fall sharply by 5%. It says during the pandemic period the gaming industry benefited enormously economically, but it's now clear that the corona boom has come to an end. Last year the revenues of top gaming companies worldwide only increased by just under 5%. In the previous year, growth of 12.5% had been achieved, and in the pandemic year 2020, sales had even soared by almost 28%. Profitability has also suffered after still achieving an average margin of 24.9% in 2020 and 23.5% in 2021. The margin shrank to just 18.1% in 2022, below the pandemic level of 19.7%. But the thing is, that means that even last year, there was still a 5% growth in revenue. Is that not a good thing? Like, I get it. Like, these boards want to see growth year on year on year, but surely the pandemic and the fact that we were all fucking sitting around in 2020 and 2021, sat at home playing video games and buying video games because it was the only fucking thing that we could do. Surely that has to be taken into account, and surely there are financial professionals out there forecasting this drop. And to have laid off thousands upon thousands, over 18,000 people from the gaming industry in the last year, just over, based on that slight dip in revenue margins and profit margins, It's fucking crazy to me. Is it not crazy to you? And whenever we hear about new layoffs happening, we always get some sort of bullshit corporate speech excuse that comes out with the press release, and it's always something like, oh, we overhired during the pandemic, or we're doing a company reset or a company refresh. Now, personally, I think there is a number of reasons that could be affecting these layoffs, and I do think that the profit margin thing is what's at the core of it, but I think that has probably sparked a rethink from the CEOs and the higher ups, shall we say, about how they are running these operations. But that's never ever the shit that we hear about when we find out about these people getting laid off. I guess the first thing that I would say is playing a big part in this is the influence of AI. I mean, AI is fucking taking over the world right now. And not only that, it's akin to like the boom in chipsets, I guess, when the power of computing would double like 3 times a year or something. I don't know the exact figures, but with AI, it's even faster than that. AI is getting stronger and better at all times, and it's like, what, 2 years old? And so the question is, you know, in what ways can AI be implemented to help do a job better, to help do a job quicker, and to help do a job cheaper? And I'm not saying we've got AI developers out there who are, you know, fucking computers that are literally developing the code. In terms of like programmers and so on, losing their jobs because they're being replaced by AI. I think where it's probably more common is things like using AI to design a model of how the company runs, to understand the people that work at the company and where there is perhaps too many staff doing one job, like ways at streamlining the efficiency of how things are done. And that would have been a human team before. You know, if you've got 30 people working in that department, for example, you probably now need 2 or 3 and a fucking powerful AI. I see a lot of the art departments being affected. It's easy to see how powerful AI art generation can be, especially when overseen by human hands as well. So it really would not surprise me if AI is playing a big part in these layoffs. That being said, though, there's a lot of moral questions that need to be raised within the gaming industry at the moment. One of the ones that shocked me the most was Insomniac games. How the fuck are Sony laying people off from Insomniac games? This is a company that from 2018 have put out Marvel Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, Marvel Spider-Man 2, and Ratchet & Clank: A Rift Apart. All of those games have been successful titles for the PlayStation. In fact, Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales was a launch title for the PS5, and Ratchet & Clank was one of the earliest games for the PlayStation 5. These were like flagship games that helped ship the PlayStation 5 console. Not only did they help ship the PlayStation 5, they have, without a doubt, played a part in getting the PlayStation sales to where they are. The PS5 is currently outselling the PS4. And let's talk about that. Like, this comes in a time where there were chip shortages, nobody could get hold of the fucking console when it first came out. They have still managed to sell more PlayStation 5 units in the last year than PlayStation did at this time in its life cycle. That is a massive, massive achievement for Sony. And Insomniac games were pivotal in achieving those figures. So when is it enough? As a studio, what do you have to do to avoid layoffs if Insomniac games are being hit? And it's baffling because you think about other studios like Sony Santa Monica, creators of God of War and God of War Ragnarok. Ragnarok particularly, a massive, huge game for the PlayStation 5. Well, there hasn't been any layoffs there. So as of November 2022, God of War 2018 had sold over 23 million copies. And since then, it will have obviously sold more than that. God of War Ragnarok, as of November 2023, has sold over 15 million copies. So we're pushing on 40 million copies there of games sold by Santa Monica Studios from 2018 until the end of last year. This from game developer Marvel Spider-Man 2 has topped 10 million sales in under 4 months. The milestone means that the entire Marvel Spider-Man franchise has eclipsed 50 million sales. 50 million sales, man. What do you have to do? Like, what do you have to do to keep your job if you're part of a team that is churning that amount of sales out, and that's just Spider-Man. There's Ratchet and Clank on top of that. Now, here's the thing though, and here's what might counter that argument. Marvel Spider-Man has sold over 50 million copies, right? But around 50% of those profits goes to Marvel, because that is part of the licensing deal. God of War is licensed to Sony, so Sony take all of the profits. Marvel take 50% of the profits. And we're seeing so many licensed games coming out and in development at the moment. Whose fault is that? I'll tell you, it's not. It's not the people who are getting laid off, because they're not the people that are brokering the deals with these other media companies in order to use the licensing of their products within video games. And it costs a fucking lot of money. And Spider-Man doesn't really fall into this category because Spider-Man's done well, but how many licensed games have we seen recently that have just been a fucking flop? The most obvious and most recent one being Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Absolute flop. Cost a lot of money to make. Took a lot of time and resources to make. And it was an absolute shit show. And it's made no money for DC. And it's made no money for the developers. And even the games that are licensed that are good just sometimes don't do very well. You look at Guardians of the Galaxy. That's actually a really, really good game. But it just didn't pop. And it raises the question of this route that we're going down now, where we're releasing more and more licensed games, and companies that are under bigger umbrellas like Insomniac don't make any more original IPs. We need you on Spider-Man. We need you on Wolverine, because we've paid fucking loads of money to get this Marvel license, so you're going to be exclusively working on Marvel games. Because the problem is that you're kind of pigeonholing a market there. People will buy these games because they are into that franchise that you're specifically selling. If you look through my video game collection, I barely own any licensed games, apart from the ones that I get for free. And I own the Spider-Man games because they reviewed so well, and because, you know, people talk about them as good games, so I was like, I need to get myself a piece of that. But until the point where I know and it is confirmed to me that this game is a must play, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to buy DC games. I'm not going to buy Marvel games. I'm not going to buy Fast and Furious games, etc., etc., because I'm just not fucking interested. And that's what Sony did so well in the PlayStation 4 era. There were so many titles that were original IPs, that were new experiences created for gamers, not created for a specific market. We're talking about Ghost of Tsushima. We're talking about Horizon Zero Dawn. We're talking about God of War. We're talking about The Last of Us, man. The Last of Us. These are titles for Sony, created by Sony, and they're the games that I want to play. It's a personal opinion, but I think it would be shared by many. Like, did anybody see that Toys for Bob, the creators of the Spyro Reignited trilogy and Crash Bandicoot 4, they are going back indie. Toys for Bob are literally leaving Activision to become independent. Why is that? In their statement, they said, "We're thrilled to announce Toys for Bob is spinning off as an independent game development studio. Over the years, we've inspired love, joy, and laughter for the inner child in all gamers. We pioneered new IP and hardware technologies in Skylanders. We raised the bar for best-in-class remasters in Spyro Reignited Trilogy. We've taken Crash Bandicoot to innovative, critically acclaimed new heights. With the same enthusiasm and passion, we believe it's now time to take the studio and our future games to the next level. This opportunity allows us to return to our roots of being a small and nimble studio." One thing that they sure as fuck don't mention in this statement is Call of Duty. And that's essentially what Toys for Bob's fate was, Call of Duty. In 2021, after Crash Bandicoot, they were moved away from that, and they became a Call of Duty support studio. That's what they were doing. They were supporting the development and the churning out of Call of Duty media. It's just confusing. The whole thing is just really confusing for me. The things we've talked about so far, Insomniac Games have made a shitload of money for PlayStation. They helped ship the console and get it out there. We talked about licensed games and how there's this push towards licensed gaming at the moment, and that costs developers a lot of money, and in turn lowers the amount or the percentage of profits that are recouped back from these big projects. A lot of them fail as well, so that's the other thing. And then decisions like Activision making Toys for Bob a Call of Duty support studio, it's all about the decisions. Who's making these fucking decisions? It's the executives, right? And the executives are the ones on the big fucking bucks. They're the ones making the fucking huge salaries at the end of the day. They're making the decisions to greenlight these games that are fucking failing and that are absolute garbage. They're the ones overseeing these projects, and they're the ones keeping their jobs. And so it's cyclical, because the executives are still there. They're still going to be the ones overseeing these new daft projects and churning out just shit that people don't want to buy, or that isn't made to the quality that we want it to be at. Another thing to consider is the price changes in games recently. You know, we're talking like 70, 80 pounds now to buy a first party title from someone like Sony. And these games are coming more thick and fast than ever. If you want to buy a game or two every single month, because that's how quickly they're dropping, how can people commit to like £140 a month? How can the average working person commit to that sort of money? That's on top of the money it costs to get the console. That's on top of the money it costs to be able to play games online and the subscription services and so on. Like, people just can't afford that money. You know, I'm looking at the newest games. Final Fantasy Rebirth is one. Like, I'm a fucking massive Final Fantasy fan. I really want to play the game, but I've just not bought it yet because I can't justify dropping 70, 80 pounds on a game right now, especially when I'm so backlogged with other games because there's been that many dropping. Spider-Man 2, still not finished it. Alan Wake 2, still not finished it. Has there been any thought from these executives that maybe the pricing of games at the moment is what's causing the margins to drop slightly? Because the cheaper games that come out, like your Helldivers, which is like a £35 game, it's fucking killing it. Helldivers is fantastic. And then you've got the other side of the coin, which is Skull and Bones, a game that took like 10 years to fucking make, and it is an absolute piece of shit. It is dross, and you're expected to pay upwards of £60 for that game when you can pick up games like Helldivers for £20 cheaper, or pick up some excellent indie games for even cheaper than that. And sometimes it's like occurring within the same sphere. So you've got Ubisoft, who just put out Skull and Bones, absolute piece of shit. They spent so much money creating that game, and they spent so much money marketing that game and fucking jamming it down people's throats. That's the game everyone was talking about. That's the Ubisoft game that Ubisoft wanted everybody to play. Meanwhile, on the flip side, they just released Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which is a fantastic Metroidvania. Like, it's a lot of fun. It's a great game, but they don't think people want to buy that game and don't want to play that game, so they don't push it, they don't market it, they don't promote it much. It kind of just shadow drops, comes out. It sold like 500,000 copies, which is really not much. However, it's a way better game than Skull and Bones, and it's way cheaper than Skull and Bones. So who's making these decisions about where the money's going within the company? So yeah, I don't know. I do not know what the actual reasons are, but I know that it's not all the bullshit that's been coming out in the press release. It's definitely a mixture or a combination of all of the shit that we talked about in this video. I guess another thing is the live service bubble has definitely popped. This time last year or the year before, it was pretty much all that developers could talk about. Oh, we want to pump some money into the live service model. We've seen live service game after live service game fail and hit the deck and lose a lot of money. And that's just greed. It's because these companies are looking at games like Genshin Impact, like Apex, like Fortnite, and they're seeing the profits that these games are turning over, and they want a sniff of that coin, but it's not working for you. Anyway, that's it, rant over. I just wanted to talk about it because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and I just do not understand why the video game market is in the state that it's in, because it is so profitable. This is not a video game crash like there was in the 80s. The market is not rejecting video games. Video games are more popular than ever, and thus they should be thriving. But these decisions that are trickling down from the top, there's too many fuck-ups in gaming at the moment, and it's the people at the bottom that are creating them that are fucking paying the price for it. Anyway, if you like this video, please leave a like. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.